Good afternoon. I'm Tim Richards, Technical Services Manager of the Managing General Agents Association. And on behalf of the MGAA, I'd like to welcome you to our briefing this afternoon. This is being delivered by Carbon Underwriting on the subject of why the question, demystifying insurers' information requests. Before I introduce our presenter, I'd just like to run through a few housekeeping points. Please ensure your microphone and camera are turned off. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free to use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Time allowing, these will be asked and answered at the end of the event. If we run out of time, questions will be answered after the event. This presentation is accredited for CPD hours if relevant to your ongoing professional development program. The briefing is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be issued post-event together with the slides and our feedback survey. Please take the time to complete our survey, which will take no longer than 2 minutes, as this allows us to deliver the best possible future events to our membership. So just as a recap, today's briefing is on the subject of why the question, demystifying insurers' information requests from Carbon Underwriting. So let me introduce you to our presenter, Will Morris. Will is the Underwriting Director of Property, Casualty and Specialty Business at Carbon Underwriting, the Lloyd's syndicate dedicated to MGA business. Will has a lengthy background in the casualty and MGA markets, with previous senior roles at AGCS, Munich Re and HDI Global Specialty. So without further ado, and I've rushed through that to maximise the time. Enjoy the briefing, everyone. And over to you, Will.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, you never recognise yourself from your own CV when it's read out, but hello, everybody, and we'll crack on. So you've obviously heard about me. Just that is my email address at the bottom. If you do have any queries, please drop me a line afterwards. Obviously, you can ask questions on the chat. Sorry, I'm being harassed by Zoom now. So just perhaps to talk about a little bit around the subject. So Tim, in his wisdom, and quite rightly, vetoed my original title for this, which is "Why Are Insurers Such a Pain in the Arse?" You might think that's ironic coming from an insurer, but I have actually sat on both sides of the table. I was for a while the head of underwriting at an MGA. Actually the nuclear pool, which is an unusual MGA, but it is an MGA nonetheless. And I had 25 plus capacity providers and 25 plus reinsurers. And there were occasions when, in the nicest possible way, they made my life a misery with their requests and so forth. So I guess if you are involved in an MGA, if you are a broker, if you are on the underwriting side, I share your pain, because I have sat through some of those discussions myself, and if I'm brutally honest, sworn under my breath, in some cases not under my breath. And that's the other point I wanted to say. Two things you should know about me. One is that I do swear quite a lot, but I've been put on a special warning by the MGAA, so hopefully the language will be acceptable. And secondly is that I never make a presentation that doesn't include a photo of my dog R2. So moving swiftly on, my philosophy underwriting is be more R2, which is be more chilled, be more relaxed, think a little bit more, and don't rush into stuff. And that will not be his last appearance. So I'm conscious some of you are probably thinking, why on earth have I signed up to this? So just to talk about what we're going to be talking about today. So, number one, what are the actual challenges from, I'm tempted to say both sides of the table. That makes it sound adversarial. And also, obviously, brokers have a very important role to play in the MGA space. So, but obviously different problems arise depending on where you're coming from the problem. Secondly, it's about hard versus soft information, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But in the words of the proverb or the cliche, to a hammer everything is a nail. And if you're an actuary, if you're an underwriter, if you're a claims handler, or if you're a claims manager, or if you're a CAT modeler, you tend to come at this from one direction. So part of the challenge for insurers is trying to blend those information requests to make sure that those trying to address them, those at the receiving end, are not getting 27 different requests, which are more or less asking for the same information, but are flavored differently, or are in slightly different categories. We're going to talk about information requirements and perhaps why we make them. And we're going to talk about what we do with the information. I can promise you, speaking for Carbon, but I suspect also for a lot of markets, the information you provide is always used. It doesn't go into some great sort of information graveyard in the sky. And then, of course, we have the key point of for most people on this presentation, which is how does it benefit MGAs? I mean, I can tell you how it benefits insurers, but obviously the key for us, given who you are, is how does it benefit you, the guys and the gals on the street at the sharp end of doing business. Learning objectives for today. Okay, so explain what drives insurers, which we could spend several days on itself. Explain the information requirements. So, you should be able to articulate what insurers are looking for and why. Explain really why quantity and quality both matter. I'm sure we've all been in situations where somebody's sent us a spreadsheet the size of San Francisco and said, there you go, which is useless, but equally, too much information can be a bad thing. Too little information can be a bad thing. A lot of it is around how you process it, what you use it for, and also finally, explaining the effect of both good and poor data provision. I am actually sort of flying blind, so you can see me, but I can't see you. So I'm sort of hopeful there are actually some people listening to this, and if not, happy days anyway. So just moving on. So, again, trying to sort of state the obvious. Why do insurers do delegated business, MGA business, however you want to badge it? And I'm sure you all learnt this in the CII 101, but for the sake of just setting the baseline, it's about distribution. Is there a specific distribution channel you can't access? Is it something that the MGA can do better? It's about diversification, both in terms of the product mix, the distribution mix, but also, try different areas of the world, different lines of business. It's about entry to new markets. It may well be the easiest way to enter a new market, and it's about niche specialization. There are many MGAs who are simply the best at what they do, and like I say, the nuclear pool, I would say, where I worked, was one of them, but that's not obviously the only one. So, and the challenges from an MGA perspective, and of course you guys will all be familiar with this, but just to reiterate that, is that MGA management spend a lot of time on capacity, keeping capacity happy, finding capacity. And that in turn filters down through the businesses. And before you know where you are, everybody's running around trying to answer complex information requests. They don't know why they're there, they don't know what they're for, and they don't know what they're used for. And my experience, a lot of people, a lot of the sort of the women running MGAs want to underwrite. They don't particularly want to be administrators. They don't particularly want to be providing information. They want to focus on their core business. And going back to the 3 points above, if you are an insurer supporting an MGA, you want the MGA to be doing what they're good at. You don't want to be distracting them. And I'm conscious people might be laughing in a hollow fashion at that. Equally, MGAs, with a few exceptions, have limited resource and bandwidth. Again, it's no good saying to an MGA, if you're an insurer, we want you to keep commissions low, we want a low-cost model, and then saying to them, by the way, can you hire 500 people to do all of my information requests? And I would also say, at the risk of stating the obvious, and this might have been different 20, 30, 40 years ago, delegation is not just about the underwriting, it's about that holistic delegation, claims, compliance, regulation, who is responsible for what, and that plays a role in information requests. So I'm hoping you can all hear me, and I'm hoping everybody's still alive and hasn't gone to lunch, but I'm going to carry on regardless. So on that note, soft versus hard information. That's a photo of Artu as a young dog. Not really sure why I put it in there, but hopefully it's cheered one or two of you up. So what do I mean when I talk about hard versus soft information requirements? So some information requirements are hard. So, we're talking about those that are focused upon assessing performance. They're focused upon numbers and data and stuff that can be manipulated and analyzed. And these might be triangulations, they might be complaints data, they might be limit profiles or whatever. But it's important because, going back to my point about, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail, speaking with my underwriting hat on, there are some soft information requirements. And just to be clear, by soft, I don't mean less important or less relevant. They are things like, what is your competitive advantage as an MGA, and how is it evidenced? And I've put this last point in red because if you take only one thing, hopefully you take more than one thing away today, but if you take only one thing away, is how willingly is data produced. I'll talk about the details of this in a bit, but the attitude of a business partner, whether it's a broker or an MGA, in terms of producing data is almost as important as the data that's produced. So in the sense that we don't expect, certainly from Carbon, because one of Carbon's USPs is that we are very good at tech and we are very good at data. We don't expect everybody to have the same level of data as us. I don't say that in an arrogant fashion. We don't expect everybody to be able to answer that request immediately or to answer it in exactly the fashion we wanted to. But it's that cooperative approach to say, okay, we can do this. It'll take us a week, whatever it might be. We can do this. It is absolutely key as to how insurers and MGAs cooperate. And I would just say, just to be clear, the corollary of that, it's a two-way street, is the insurer has to be clear with their business partners. Why are they asking for it? What it will be used for? What the benefits are? So, you know, we've all been in situations where you get random data requests and you think, oh, you know, why has this come across? And of course, the answer is because somebody in head office wants it or whatever. So again, I'm conscious I'm probably beating this one to death, but I would really, really think about that from your perspective, is soft versus hard, but also one of the most important soft factors is that willingness to talk about data, that willingness to have a partnership and so forth. The sniff test, again, you might be wondering why this comes into information requirements, but it is an information requirement, and that is about, you know, who are you people? Are you an MGA with whom we want to do business? And again, that clearly comes the other way. And part of that is about the initial information gathering. It's about the initial meetings. It's about the willingness to do things. It's about the willingness to go the extra mile and talk together. And I would give you as an example of this, I've put D&I down at the bottom. You know, a lot of businesses, a lot of people talk about D&I. They talk about inclusion and diversity. And then you go to a client meeting, whatever it might be, and there's 10 blokes who look just like me. That is not a good start. And it's not a good start, not just because a business shouldn't look like that in this day and age. It's also not a good start because if you're banging on about one thing and the first piece of evidence, the first piece of information the insurer sees goes against that, you are immediately wondering as to what the rest of the data might be like. So again, and I'm certain my competitors in the market think the same, we pay a great deal of attention to factors like that when we look at a business and when we look at how a business runs itself and how a business comports itself. And that is categorically an information requirement that we pay attention to. So moving on swiftly. So, you know, my screen is getting slightly busy, bear with me, everybody. So, you know, this is really, I guess, the big reveal, and hopefully there's nothing particularly revealing here, if I may say so. But what I'm saying here is that, you know, what's in it for you? If you are running an MGA, what is the benefit to you? So, you know, I could probably add speed in here as well, but the better and more accurate information that you provide, the better we can model it, the quicker we can model it, the more precise our view is. Now, obviously, the results are absolutely terrible. That could be a double-edged sword, but the more precise our view is, in turn, that means there's more trust and confidence we have in you. And that, that sort of green call out I've put there, you know, I'm an underwriter. I suspect a significant proportion of people on this call are underwriters, but I suspect the same applies to brokers. No underwriter in the world likes being backseat driven, so to speak. You know, you want to get on with what you're doing and what you're good at, which is underwriting within the guidelines and so forth. The more trust and confidence you have from the information that's provided, the less friction there is, the less interference there is in your day-to-day business. And again, you might say that that's a hard or a soft factor. I think it's both. If we have confidence in the information, confidence in the data, confidence in the business, the more capacity we can provide. There is a direct correlation between that confidence level and how much money insurers are prepared to put on the table. Going back again, that penultimate bullet point, that is around longer periods of time. So as I said, one of the big challenges for the management of the managers of MGAs is that they spend way too much of their time keeping capacity happy, trying to keep capacity on board, finding new capacity, etc., etc. If you have that stable base of confidence based upon good quality data, good quality analytics, partnership, you can get into longer periods, you get a stable relationship, and that frees you up to do what you're good at. And of course, the final point, the better quality of the data, the more certainty, the likely the higher your profit commission will be, and it will be paid sooner because of the data certainty. And to be honest, if that isn't a good enough motivator to be providing good quality data and good quality information, then you're probably in the wrong business. I would just say, obviously, the other call out, buffet versus barbecue service, which might seem a slightly odd thing to say, but you're probably unsurprised by that coming from me now. What this is about is that, again, we don't necessarily expect everybody to be able to do everything fantastically, from a carbon perspective, and I'm sure some of our competitors would also say this. We're able to infill some of your gaps. We're able to enrich data. We're able to buy in data sets. But at the end of the day, the people closest to the business are yourselves. The people who have the best knowledge of their own data should be yourselves and your brokers. And that's the starting point. You can garbage in, garbage out. If we get good quality base data, there's a lot of stuff that we can do with. If we don't get the base data, or if it's poor quality, you get into this endless cycle of my data's better than your data. No, it's not, and which takes us all back sort of 30 years to when I started my career. So, assuming that I haven't been stopped by Tim, hopefully everything is going okay and you can all hear me. So underwriting information requirements, and again, you can. I'll talk about underwriting information requirements, regulatory requirements, actuarial requirements. These all overlap, but I've tried to sort of split them out. So, underwriting information requirements, what do we want to know as underwriters, leaving the hard data to them? So we want to know, what do you do? And that might seem bloody obvious if you'll pardon my French, but you'd be amazed at how many business plans where you have to read 10 or 15 pages before you actually know what people are doing. The second point is how do you do it? Are you using tech? Are you old school? What distribution are you using? And then finally, we'll talk about this in a minute in the context of strategy. Are you actually any good at it? I've got a call out there that's called the restaurant bathroom test, which I ironically touched on with a broker this morning. And this is about, if you go to a restaurant and you go to the loo and the bathroom isn't very clean, or there's no towels to dry your hand, or there's somebody drunk in the corner or whatever, could be the lamb, but it doesn't give you a very good impression. And you also wonder, if that is the public face of the restaurant, that's what they're letting you see, what does it look like in the kitchens? And that's the same really with underwriting. You will always know more about your business. There's an information asymmetry, whether your business is MGAs, whether it's helicopters, whether it's oil tankers, whether it's forestry, whether it's whatever. You always know more about your business than the insurer. And that confidence level that what they can't see is equally as good as what they can see is absolutely key. So again, what we're asking for, and I'm going to sort of freestyle a bit on this as well, but what we're asking for is business plans. What is the level of experience? Who are the key people? Are they credible? And if so, why? Secondly, what is your USP? Your unique selling point. What is your shtick? What is it that makes you able to generate a competitive advantage, and how will you use it? And the question that I always come back here is, if you say, for example, I want to do high net worth business in the UK, the first question is going to be, okay, so there are already some very big, very successful players in that market. How are you going to stop them killing you at the start, at the kickoff, by opening a war chest and getting into a rate war or whatever? And then we're also interested in commercial metrics. And for me, actuaries amongst you might laugh, but commercial metrics are also, to my mind, hard information requirements, in the sense that, we're interested in what is your anticipated hit rate? What is the size of your addressable market? There's no point in pouring a load of resource into something that turns out that the maximum market GWP is £2 million or whatever. I think also that we're interested in, things that I haven't put on this slide because it could have got completely out of hand. We're interested in your underwriting guidelines. How do you think about doing business? How do you make sure everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet? How do you ensure, as an underwriting manager or an underwriting director or a class underwriter, that everybody else in the team is playing to the rules? How do your underwriting guidelines express your risk appetite? How do they express the desires of your capacity providers to generate a profit? And again, that's obviously usually a subject of very productive discussion. But again, how those are presented, how they're written, how clear they are, is key. And it goes back to that sort of restaurant bathroom test I was talking about. If you want to go into detail, if you've got a particularly specific niche, it's about, well, who are your clients? What are the names and addresses, exaggerating slightly, from the clients that you want to target initially? I'm going to move on because I'm conscious that time is running. Strategy information requirements. Again, there is some overlap here, and this links to business plans. What is your strategy? And again, are you any good at it? That links to a certain extent to the hard metrics we're going to talk about. But that is around, what lines of business do you want to write? What are the target occupations? What size of business? So the amount of times I see a business plan where somebody says, I'm going to write SME business with a public liability limit of 1 million. And you look at the limit profile, and 90% of the book is in the 1 million bracket, and they've got 10% of the book in the 10 million bracket. And you think, why would you even do that? Now, there might be good reasons, but again, that's how clear is the strategy, and are people sticking to it? Again, strategy information requirements. What are the main competitors? How are you going to grow? There is a critical mass for an MGA relationship. And this is about the why, the how, and the credibility. We've all been on that journey, carbon of all companies particularly. And how can you get from A to B, both from a market perspective, from a reinsurance perspective, from a resourcing perspective? It might be as simple as, are there enough underwriters or claims handlers or actuaries or operations people or whatever it might be in your market space that you can hire at the right terms and conditions? And finally, and again, is this a hard or soft fact to discuss, but is this an underwriting driven or a commission driven play? Does the business plan, do the details suggest that this is a business that's going to be driven like a virtual insurer, like a mini insurer, or is it a commission driven play? And again, of course, the truth in some of this can be halfway between the two. But anyway, I'm going to crack on. So pricing information requirements. Again, there is some overlap here, but what we want to know is, do you have a modern, up-to-date pricing tool for 2024, or is it more fit for 1924? So who sets your rates? Is it yourselves? Do you have external actuarial input? Do you have in-house actuaries? Do you have quantitative analysts? Do you have whoever it might be? There's no necessarily right or wrong answer to that. Of course, actuaries would say it must only be actuaries who set rates, but you have to have that idea of, have you picked them out of the air, or is there some science to it at a very base level? And that is about, is there a reputable company involved? Do you have an in-house expertise, etc., etc.? How do you know you're charging enough? And again, I could talk about this for hours, and probably you're already tired of me listening to me, but this is about rate adequacy. We hear a lot, and have heard a lot in the hard market about rate increases and so forth. And what the missing link 9 times out of 10 is rate adequacy. I, as an insurer, of course, exaggerating slightly, of course, I'm interested in risk-adjusted rate change, but I'm equally interested in rate adequacy in the sense that risk-adjusted rate change is not a particularly useful metric in many circumstances unless you also know whether your rates are adequate. So, going back to that underwriting guideline piece, does your underwriting manager have a big red button that every time something flashes up on our screen to say so-and-so underwriter has given a discount of 10%, does this alarm go off? And again, that might seem far-fetched, but again, that is the sort of, how do you control the rating of your portfolio and how do you know it's the right rating is absolutely key. I'm just going to have a quick sip of water if you'll excuse me. Pardon if there are any Tom and Jerry-esque drinking effects then. Actuarial information requirements. Those of you who know me may be having hysterics about the fact that I've managed to persuade actuaries to tell me their secrets. Again, this could be a whole presentation in itself, but what we want to know is what business did you write? What was the mix and what were the changes? And what losses did you have on these policies? And what type of losses were there? And if you look at the green call out, this is about splitting out attritional, large and cat losses, and then in turn spinning your cat models if necessary off those, thinking about what are usual losses, thinking about development patterns and so forth. So, we ask for historic risk level data, premiums, limits, exposure, deductibles, and as a minimum. Also, and this is, you'd be amazed how often it's difficult to get this, is historic claims attached to these risks. In my life, I have spent a lot of time trying to stitch different sets of data together, not with much success. And of course, that's why we have quantitative engineers, actuaries, and analysts. But also development patterns. We spend a lot of time thinking about what the development patterns are. What are you using as an MGA? What the Lloyd's curves look like, etc., etc. And it goes back to that willingness to offer data. We, again, as insurers, are happy to have that discussion. In fact, we're quite interested in having that discussion. And if you say to us, well, actually, we would like some help on this, that is equally something we're more than happy to do. But it's that from an actuarial basis, you need this data as a starting point to be able to calculate or think about the performance of the portfolio, both now and in the future. So actuarial requirements too, and again, there's some overlap here, but we're interested in rates and pricing for obvious reasons, and also interested in what your future outlook for rates and pricing is, and why is that the case. So we're interested in historic risk-adjusted rate change figures, and also what formula you use. There are different ways of calculating risk-adjusted rate change. Lloyd's has one version. There are many others out there. None of them are necessarily right or wrong, without trying to avoid starting an actuarial war here. But again, the fact that you're doing it is a good start. The next point is, do you understand, without sounding odd, do you understand where that's coming from, what the different metrics mean and how you can use them? Rate adequacy, price adequacy figures. Rating matrices, again, go back to your underwriting guide, do you have a rating matrices? Is it an online tool? Is it an Excel spreadsheet? Is it a paper-driven thing? Again, there's nothing, I'm not suggesting that some of these are necessarily bad, but it's about how much thinking do you do about pricing and who is doing that thinking. Your ILFs for excess business, for example, are another thing. It might be we agree or we don't agree, but it's seeing that information and being able to think about it. The more of this be provided, the better. And then forward-looking, again, it's about estimated premium incomes, it's about commissions, etc., so that we can build a profit and loss. We can run it through, do a sensitivity analysis, various simulations, and have that idea as to what future performance looks like. You will undoubtedly have an idea of that too, but the more information we can get and the more idea we can get of how you've arrived at what you think your performance is, the better it is. So moving swiftly on. So what do we do with all of this? You might wonder. So we use it obviously to on-level our historic premiums. We use it to build loss ratios. We use it to develop profit and loss, which we've just touched on. We use it to check you're doing what you say you're doing. And I don't mean that in a sort of secret police style thing, but it is about having that discussion to say, well, what do you think your rate adequacy is? When you said to us that you were going to get 5% rate this year, have you got 5% rate? Have you got 10% rate? Have you got 3% rate? And do you know that in a timely fashion via your systems? What are the claims trends? Are the hot spots in development? What have you done in the past to address hotspots? How often do you see hotspots occurring? How do you prevent yourself being cherry-picked or anti-selected against? It's also, again, basics to ensure that we're comparing apples with apples. insurance can be very sophisticated. It can also be quite a blunt instrument. And some of the development curves, for example, are quite blunt instruments. The best development, or the best data, is the bespoke data that belongs to a particular account. But if you don't have sufficient history on that, it's about working as a team with yourselves to build that picture, but to make sure that we're not looking at X when we should be looking at Y. And obviously, at the risk of stating the extremely obvious, you have to do, it's about deciding whether it represents a good deal or not. And then just moving swiftly on. So compliance requirements. Again, we touched on this earlier on. Delegation is not just about underwriting. I cannot emphasize that enough. It might have been just about underwriting 30 odd years ago, but isn't now. And you have to look at that whole picture. And I know from my experience that plenty of people who set up MGAs, they don't set it up with the best will in the world because they want to be focused on compliance 24/7. They set it up because they're entrepreneurs, because they have a good business idea, and they want to try and make it work. They have the connections. And we, as insurers, are obviously very keen and delighted to support people who have that entrepreneurial spirit, who have the ability to generate profitable business and to run a business successfully. So again, quite rightly, in this day and age, everybody should be focused on and concerned about regulation, concerned about compliance. And that's about both, I guess, the soft and the hard, or the spirit and the letter. So we're interested in as to how the business conducts itself. We're interested in how employees and directors have conducted themselves. Are they obeying the spirit and the letter of the rules? Do you treat customers fairly? And there's obviously different sets of data that can demonstrate this, but it's also about not just treating customers fairly. How do you know you're treating customers fairly? What are your systems in terms of information requirements that you can provide to us that demonstrate that? Do you know your business and your customers? That might seem very, very obvious, but if you're doing business overseas, if you're writing US excess and surplus business, for example, again, different regulatory regime, but that's about how can you demonstrate to insurers that you are taking regulatory requirements into account. Speaking at a very base level, from a purely selfish insurer perspective, we ask for this information because we are interested in customers, but also we're interested in making sure that we in turn don't get into trouble with the regulators, wherever they may be. Customer first, us second, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that was a concern. But it's also about, do you do the right thing? And you might be saying to me, well, that's not an information requirement. That's a sort of fairly ephemeral, vague thing. But it is an information requirement, and it can be produced in various different ways. The most obvious thing is, have you appeared in the Insurance Insider for doing something naughty recently? But it's also about being much more sophisticated than that. And just to take perhaps a step back and talk about how different things come across differently. So if you're writing US excess and surplus business, for example, as an MGA, and I'm conscious this is a UK audience, but just as one example, quite often you get people say to me, well, it's very vanilla business, which I was sort of raised an eyebrow at that, because vanilla business doesn't necessarily go into the US excess and surplus lines market. So immediately you've got a sort of a dissonance of who is saying what and why are they saying it. Anyhow, just moving swiftly on. So the second part of compliance and regulatory, what we ask for is about conduct management information, the evidence of robust systems of peer review. Again, we can help with peer review, we can help with audits, we will obviously audit, but the question is, how are you, going back to my point earlier on about what control does your underwriting manager, does your CEO, does your underwriting director have? What is the evidence that you are on top of how you're underwriting your book, what your underwriters are doing, whether they're doing what's in the underwriting guide and so forth. And that's the evidence. Compliance is not a nice to have. Compliance is not a separate part of the business. Compliance is part of the warp and weft of what we do. And again, that is very clearly going back to it's not just what is delivered, it's how it's delivered. A willingness to embrace compliance, a willingness to be part of a compliant process. It is absolutely key, because that is not an option in this day and age. That is an absolute barrier to entry. It's an absolute condition of doing business. But I would say, and I've been asked to put on record by my compliance team. I'm joking, actually, this is me, but the compliance is not the enemy, and I think in many ways we've moved away from that. But we don't that confrontational approach about providing compliance information and it's not necessary and so forth. At a base level, why are we asking for this from you? Why do insurers ask for this information? It's because correcting mistakes is always more expensive than solving them up front and having the right processes in. And so you might say, well, it will cost me some money to install this measuring thing, or I'll have to do that, etc. Trust me, this is always easier than having somebody in your case from Lloyd's or the FCA. And I think, but it is a team effort. Going back to that buffet barbecue thing, we as insurers, we're not giving you something and then walking away. We are maintaining that ability to work with you in partnership and to make sure that we can collectively deliver the right thing, both in terms of underwriting results, in terms of management, and in terms of compliance. You'd be delighted to know that I think we are almost at the end, although I do have some further points that I can touch on if needs be. But just to remind you of the learning objectives for today, again, I'm conscious that this presentation could have lasted a week, and perhaps for some of you feels like it already has lasted a week. But it's explaining what drives insurers, what are insurers looking for. It's about explaining the information requirements that we look for, obviously at a fairly high level, explaining why quantity and quality both matter. I mean, again, we have these discussions. How many years of data do you need? Is it 3? Is it 5? Is it 10? The answer for us is the more the merrier. The same with risk level data. We occasionally get questions about, well, do you have systems that can handle 10,000 policies? Yes, we have systems that can handle multiples of that. Risk level data, the ability to deliver that risk level data, but accurate risk level data, is absolutely key for all of those advantages that we talked about earlier on. And the final point was explaining the effect of both good and bad data provision. And hopefully I've sort of made that clear. This is not insurers being a pain in the backside. This is about the better that idea, the better that trust, the better the confidence, the more beneficial, both in terms of the longevity of capacity, in terms of the longevity of the business, and in terms of the ability to add additional lines. If we enter a relationship as an insurer with casualty business, and the data is very good and everything runs smoothly and the compliance is great, it doesn't take a genius to work out that it's far, far easier to add extra lines and extra capacity, whether it's property or A&H or financial lines, to that, because you have a level of confidence on the data provided and to start a new relationship elsewhere. And our aim, and I'm sure a lot of insurers' aim, is to write multiple lines of business with the same MGA. So it's in everybody's interest to build that accurate data platform, to understand what people need and to automate it as much as possible. Anyhow, just any questions? So I thought Tim will no doubt step in a moment, but I thought as a starter for 10, because I know this is probably the most important question of the day, as you'll have seen from my photograph at the start. So the answer is no, it's not a hangover Movember tash, it's a lockdown tash. And yes, my family do like it, although I have a feeling that my wife may be changing her opinion on that. So with that, you will be delighted to know that I'm going to shush for a second and let Tim or yourselves ask any questions you would like to.
Thanks, Will. Really appreciate it. It's really, really useful presentation. Thank you for that. I don't currently have any questions in the chat, group meeting chat. So if any of you do have any questions, do feel free to type them in there and we can put those to Will. No, I just thought we had a question. It's just
Wow.
some edits, which would be
I definitely saw Charles Manchester enter the call. I can't believe Charles doesn't have a question if he's still there. But
I did see Charles come in. I think he left after a little while.
Did he? Well. Wow, that's. But I mean, I think I'm obviously happy to take questions now or online, and I'm conscious that this could be a huge subject, and I'm conscious that people's feelings can be strong on this, particularly if you're the person at the receiving end and wondering why you've been asked these questions. And I would say, we as insurers quite like a bit of challenge. I mean, you might laugh hollowly at that, but I quite like being asked. If we ask a client for a set of data, I quite like being asked, well, what are you going to do with that? Why is that relevant? And we are not perfect. It gives us pause, and you think, why are we asking for that? Why are we asking for that in that way? And is the benefit that we think it's collectively going to give us, both the MGA and ourselves, in terms of that result, is it worth the effort of collecting it? Because there is a tapering point of usefulness sometimes of data, despite the fact that we would really like to have everything that we could get. Tim, back to you.
Yeah, we've got a number of questions that have since come in. One's for me, so I'll quickly answer that. Will the slides be shared? And the answer is yes, they will, along with a link to this recording. So look out for that. There'll also be our post-session survey. So do give us your feedback on that. That's always useful. So if I'm going to go to Tony Willis, this is more of an observation, I think, but thank you for speaking up for the capacity providers. Before I ask a client, I ask myself, so what? As in, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah, no, I think I've sort of preempted that, hopefully, but I think that's a very good question, because again, we've all had these requests. You get the same, sometimes just going off piece, perhaps slightly, talking about special acceptances or referrals. You get people ask endless questions about special acceptances or whatever it might be, and then decline them. And you think, well, to be honest, I'm not sure all those questions and all the effort that's gone into it is worth it when you could have just declined it in a split second. So I do think there is a very clear duty upon insurers, and we are getting better at it. You might laugh hollowly, but we are getting better at it. But it's, to really think about that what is the difference? And one of the holy grail that we were all looking for at the moment, whether it's AI, whether it's other ways of augmenting data, is what are the things that we are collectively missing, that if we had that information, without boiling the sea, boiling the ocean, what are the things that if we had them, they would make a material difference? Going back to British cycling and marginal gains, and what can you do to improve performance? And that is about thinking long and hard about what is being asked for and what its benefit might be, and also feeding that back to the people who have to collect the data to make sure you're all on the same page. Sorry, Tim, long answer, but
Not at all. No, it's perfect. And a comment from So Shore here, which is how to balance sharing enough info to demonstrate we have a special source and not giving our pricing tables, especially when we don't have a proven track record. And we also have a question here. Do keep the questions coming. This is the last question currently from Stuart Gardner. How do you approach, and we've got one in already actually, but how do you approach a new product idea? Early cyber springs to mind when there was no historical data.
Yeah, no, there's some good questions there. So I think going back to the pricing one, I mean, I think everybody has their trade secrets. The trite answer is to say, well, I think everybody has to make sure that you have a proper NDA or however you want it phrased in place, so that that when you're trusting insurers with your information, or vice versa, that it remains sacrosanct, for want of a better expression. I think it goes back to this point around, if there is stuff that you feel is confidential, for whatever reason it might be, say so. I think it's far better to have that open discussion, going back to my slightly crude restaurant bathroom thing, because insurers, I'm afraid to say, can be suspicious sods at times. And if there is a secret room they don't know about, they always think the worst. And I think if there is a reason for not disclosing stuff, or the stuff that's work in progress, or the stuff that you want to caveat, I for one genuinely would fully accept that, and my colleagues would say the same thing, fully able to sort of take that into account, or put it to one side, or agree with you. But that open discussion based upon quality of data, etc., is very important. So hopefully that's answered the question. And then the second point was really around, how do you deal with things where they're startups, or it's a new line of business, or it's not particularly data rich. And I would say, as a starting point for that, it's about, without going all Dragon's Den, it's about whether you, as the MGA or the sort of proto MGA, the embryo MGA, are able to articulate clearly either with parallels, with data that you've been able to build, with as if data, with what I would call sort of synthetic portfolio analysis. Are you able to, because it's your business, we're not the experts, you are if it's a new idea. Are you able to articulate clearly why it's going to work? Going back to that competitive advantage piece, going back to the what is it bringing new? Why is it accretive to the market? I mean, cyber, let's be honest, cyber I think is still work in progress in the market. It's much more advanced than it was, but I suspect we still haven't got 100% handle on every aspect of cyber insurance and cyber coverages. So, the London market, but I think the insurance market as a whole is well known for innovation, for bringing forward new products. And we can't, not everything can be a new product. You cannot write a portfolio just of MGAs that are bringing new products to the market. But we are certainly very open to innovation. We actively seek new businesses and innovative products because that is the lifeblood. And if you have the data and the colleagues who are able to handle that data and able to build platforms that work it makes your life a lot easier than it was, frankly, when I started 30 years ago, where you did it on the back of a cigarette packet or whatever. So I would, again, most insurers would hopefully say the same thing. We would rather see ideas than not. And going back to that barbecue buffet thing, any insurer worth its salt in 2024 should be able to fill the gaps if they want to build a relationship. They should also be coming to the party saying, well, have you tried thinking about it this way? Here's a data set you could use. We could augment it this way. We could buy stuff in, etc., etc. So from an MGA perspective, I would be very much asking that question about your potential capacity providers and your brokers, if there are, about how can I work with people to make this better or to refine it, because nobody gets it right straight off the bat, to be honest. Long answer again. Go on, Tim. Is there any more?
There's another question which is similar but is different. How would you approach a new MGA proposition that doesn't have historical performance data or triangles due to prior employer confidentiality, but has outstanding prior profitability with experienced underwriters?
Yeah, it's a good shout. Obviously, you have to quite clearly respect the law and respect other people's intellectual property and so forth. There is much improved market data out there on most lines of business. So it goes back to that soft and hard factor. The question is, can you build a synthetic set of results from what you know about the market, from what you might know about your experience at that line of business? Can you build, and that is only ever going to be a starting point. That being blunt is the reason we have people with brains the size of planets in the room next to me here, is that we have some very bright people who can run different Monte Carlo simulations, who can run sensitivity analysis to look at different sets of data that have been built up. But it's also that's where soft factors come in, and it's not about meeting people in the pub and having a chat and saying what do you think about Diana, or what do you think about Tony, or whoever it might be. It's about we are all involved in a market. One of the joys of the insurance market is it's still to a certain extent a people business. People have reputations. They are relatively easy to check out. So it's about trying to build from different sources. Information is not just data and numbers. Information has many different faces, and it's about selecting and building a model that works from that information. As an underwriter, you can't have everything in your portfolio, as I said a minute ago, as a startup. But as innovative underwriters, which we are at Carbon, we are continuously looking for startups, for new business, and for opportunities where we can help people get off the ground, or we can help people grow. We can't do that with everybody, and not everybody would probably want to do it with us. But that is about trying to demonstrate from both an MGA perspective, but also from an insurer perspective, what your USP is and what you are collectively bringing to the table.
Thanks, Will. That's the end of the questions. So we've still got a few minutes. I don't know if you've got any last thoughts before I close off the meeting.
I was going to see if I could. My screen is jammed for some reason, but I was going to see if I could. I do have one last photo of my dog, but you're probably going to have to live without it. It'll be a surprise if you check it online. You'll be able to see the last photo of the dog. No, I would just say, people talk about the market. Obviously, there are different distribution channels. People talk about whether is delegated business, is MGA business just another distribution channel in inverted commas? And for me, it's not. It's much more than that. It is a a different way of doing business, and it people sometimes talk about whether it's a soft market thing, whether it's a hard market thing, and I think those who are serious about the MGA business from a carrier perspective, and obviously also from an MGA and a broker perspective, those who are serious are prepared to do the hard yards to build systems, to keep those systems constantly innovating, to be able to absorb data, to be able to support people who perhaps don't have that data to really get from A to B. I mean, we're all in the same business, which is, number one, providing products that are the correct thing for consumers, and also providing a sufficient return on capital for everybody involved to justify starting the business. So everybody, I think, certainly from an insurance perspective and certainly from a carbon perspective, is trying to push those boundaries forwards as to what we can do by using new tech. And so I wouldn't be afraid if your data you don't have enough data, or you feel that your data doesn't represent a picture. We would rather have that discussion. The key is being open about it from both directions, so that we start on a basis of transparency and trust, and you can build from there. But I think that's more than enough from me, Tim, to be honest.
Okay, thanks very much, Will. Much appreciated. I'll just end by saying thanks so much, Will, once again for the
My pleasure.
session. I'm sure everyone will agree it's been really engaging. As you would have seen, you can reach Will at will.morris@carbonuw.com, or feel free to contact me at tim.richards@mgaa.co.uk with any questions or introductions. I'll be happy to pass those on. Thanks also to all of you for joining us. Don't forget to provide your feedback and look out for forthcoming MGAA events. And just finish by saying, hope you all have a productive afternoon, and thanks.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.